Well, hey, good Wednesday evening to you folks. How are you doing? It's good to see you. It's good to be seen by you. And I, of course, am your happy host, Bill Sylvie, aka the Dungeon Delver. And I hope you're doing absolutely stellar today. I hope you are having a wonderful, wonderful evening. Greetings, Joshua Garlock, Sausage Toes. It's time. It's time. But anyway, cheers. I hope you have a nice cold drink, cold snack to hand. Derek Mann. It's Derek Mann. Mead, greetings. Good to see you. But yeah, so Kyle will be here momentarily, but while we await his arrival, I just want to remind you folks, of course, that tonight's video is brought to you by our friends over at Hellebarde Games. Now, Hellebarde Games makes the kind of modules they would like to play, whether it's for OSR, 5th edition, Castles and Crusades. Old School is in play at the table, and you can check them out on their website at hellebardegames.com or on Drive-Thru RPG. That's Hellebarde Games, and we love us some folks over at Hellebarde. Speaking of people we love, Kyle will be here in just a hot second, but I do want to make a quick announcement. Tomorrow night, Stephen Radney McFarlane of Gripnir Games will be here to talk about The Glimmering, this kind of interesting RPG platform and game by itself that they've got in the works. I thought it might be something some of you guys would be interested in seeing. So we'll welcome Stephen with open arms and ask him all kinds of questions about what exactly they've got going on over there, talk to him about RPGs and so on and etc. So that's happening. That's starting tomorrow night at 8 p.m. and we'll have a grand old time. And speaking of grand times, I think it's about time I pulled the deadbolt off the green room door and welcomed in the thunder from down under, our antipodean co-host, Mr. Kyle Schuant. Kyle, how you doing, my brother?
Hello, boys and girls. I'm a little bit late because I thought that you were going to start a little bit late, because you usually do.
Oh.
So I came that 2 or 3 minutes later.
Well, that's okay. It gave me a minute to get some preamble ramble sorted out. So you got your you have your mug of the black stuff, and I have my glass of the black stuff. So cheers.
Cheers. As I've said before, I'd happily have other stuff on the show. I used to. I got lazy and I stopped doing it. But for my gym, I used to have a little Q&A section. Series of videos called Schnapps with Schuant. And Sunday evening, after everyone had left the gym, I'd sit down and I'd say, I'm here to answer all your intelligent, insightful questions and the other ones, and drink schnapps. But it's a bit rough to do that at noon.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. When I do the 24-hour live stream in April, when I get back from GaryCon, and it's some ungodly hour in the morning, it'll be after 5 p.m. If you wanna hop on and belt one back, I'll be nearly incapacitated, and you can get nearly incapacitated.
Well, fatigue. I was just discussing the other day with my wife why I had walked the children to school rather than driving them, because I had fewer than 6 hours of sleep, and the studies are that fewer than 6 hours of sleep is equivalent to exceeding the blood alcohol limit of 0.05. So if you've got too little sleep, it's like being a little bit drunk when you're driving. And the rate of car crashes and things goes up. So next time you're driving somewhere in the early morning, look around you and think of how many people have had a poor sleep.
You know what? No, I can absolutely believe that now. This is, I think this was probably a little bit before you and I started hanging out all that much in the virtual sense. But I was in a I was in a traffic accident back in 2006, I believe, 2007. And it was, I feel like in retrospect, I basically, I zoned for a half second too long when I, because we had an infant daughter, and my wife being the 9-to-5er meant that I was up, I'd have to be up for feedings and changings and putting her back to sleep and walking the floor with her in my arms and that sort of thing. So the less said about that unpleasant situation, the better. But no, I can definitely believe it.
But relevant to us, if you've been awake for a long time, you start to get a bit silly. So, you think back to those long gaming weekends we'd have when we were like young university students or something, and there'd just be you would just start on Friday night and then keep going till Saturday night without bothering to stop to sleep. Or one player says, "Oh, my character died. Okay, I'm just going to have a little nap, and then when I wake up, I'll roll up another one." And the rest of the party kept going.
Yeah. Or they did something horrible to you while you were asleep on the couch, Fill your hand with shaving cream, tickle your nose with a straw or something like that. So
Mead says 15-hour sessions, and we used to do that kind of insanity. I don't think you can do that when you're 50 though. Not without a lot of illicit substances.
The Gary Con's going to be interesting in the 24-hour haul that I'm doing. But I mean, at least a 24-hour haul just be me running my mouth and not trying to actually conduct gaming business.
So you were booked for Gary Con? What's the story?
So the story with Gary Con is that my you guys out there in audience land, behind my back, I might add, you people surreptitiously got together on the Discord, and Bluto, God bless him, said, "Hey buddy, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to create a channel on the Discord, but you can't go in it." And I was like, "Oh man, I'm going to get visited by the feds, aren't I?" But no, as it happens, they weren't Fed posting. They said, "Well, Bill needs to go to Gary Con. Let's make that happen." And so they just, I guess they dug under their mattresses and everything else. And God love you all. They did a GoFundMe and everything. So all that's booked. My plane is, our plane is booked because they're sending my wife and I. And we have a lovely little hotel in Lake Geneva we're going to be at, and that's the plan. We're cocked and loaded.
Yep, excellent. So what's your wife going to do on the weekend? Because she's not a frequent gamer, is she?
She's not a frequent gamer. I think she will definitely find something to get into. And there's like a couple of bookend days where it's basically we'll be there Monday, like almost all of Monday before we got to drive back over to Milwaukee and hop a flight to New York, and then from New York back down to Florida.
Lake Geneva doesn't have its own airport.
No, it does not. No. So we've got a couple of bookend days. We'll find something fun to do, and there's dealers sections there. She might shop for a book or some gemstone dice as she likes to have. Thank you for linking to that, Kyle. That's greatly appreciated.
So Cal says he's not wearing a Viking hat. Now, I don't know if on this show I've ever actually explained the origin of that meme. Bill knows it, but I don't think I've ever explained it on the show.
Tell them, Kyle. Tell them the Viking hat.
Way back on RPG back in the days when you could actually talk about role-playing games there, there was this poster who went by the name of Moochiver. His name was actually Kyle Marquis. I don't know what's happened to him since. He probably got banned as well. But anyway, this guy, Moochiver, I've long lost the original link, but I remember it fairly well. He was talking about players arguing with the rules. And he'd say, I could just see him sitting. Somebody had said, what do you do when players are arguing about the rules? And it slows up the game and that. And he said, bend him over and hump his hams. And everyone said, what? And he said, right, I could just see him sitting there, his Cheeto-stained fingers on the white pages of the book, speaking through a mouthful of pizza. But that's not the rules. He said, when players argue rules and get uppity, I bend them over the table and hump their hams. People were startled and alarmed when he said this. So he explained, I was watching this documentary about those candy-ass monkeys and how one makes trouble, the top monkey bends him over and humps his hams. And I thought, well, I am the GM. I am the alpha monkey of this group. So that's what I do. It's quite simply, really. I am the GM. I am in charge. Not 200 pages of badly indexed blather with glossy pages and crappy artwork, and certainly not the players. I am the GM. I wear the Viking hat. So I just thought that was great. So
Dungeon Minister says, what, Vikings didn't use headphones? I thought that was where we got Bluetooth.
Yep.
I don't know. Yes, Jarl Hakon, the Viking king of everything within a 3-meter radius around him. So
the Viking hat is meant to be more of an attitude. I have yet to actually hump the hams of any player, consensual or otherwise. But it's more of an attitude that the game master has to be in charge of things and doesn't brook argument about the rules and that. But I mean, frequent viewers will have seen how I actually run the games, and it's not about strict adherence to the rules, and I'm not telling you what your characters have to do and all the rest. And that's all up to you. But to my mind, one of the principles of game mastering is momentum over perfection. I first figured this out playing GURPS. I had a smart player who, because I'd spend all this time paging through, looking up what the modifiers were and that. And he said, just roll. Because, if they roll 3d6 to skill tests. And if they roll 3, 4, or 5, then they definitely succeed. And if they roll, 16, 17, 18, they definitely fail. And therefore, it doesn't matter what the bonuses or maluses are. So just get them to, but if they roll 8, 9, or 10 or something, then, or 12 or whatever, maybe they succeed, maybe they fail. And okay, then go and look up the bonuses. And that was really sensible, because it meant that about at least a third of the time, it just didn't matter what the bonuses were. So you could just roll the dice and it sped things up by about a third by that fraction of time where the bonuses didn't matter. So it kept things moving. Whereas other GMs I saw with GURPS didn't do that. They looked up everything every time and told the players all the options, and things got slow. For what I hear, D&D 5th edition is much the same. That basically by the time you get to the end of the combat round and find out if you live or die, you no longer care. So whatever, just make it stop. So I'm a big believer in momentum over perfection, and sometimes that requires the players are going, but it says on page 23, just no, shut up, keep moving, keep going.
Yeah.
That plus the Raymond Chandler principle of when I'm stuck in a story, just have a man walk in the room with a gun.
Yeah.
Wandering encounters. Raymond Chandler would have been a great DM because he understands about random encounters.
Never adhere to the rule written, nor allow rules to be forced upon you by some barracks room lawyer if it goes against the obvious intent of the game. firmly believe in the, Gary insisted on having the last word in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it is a fine last word indeed. Greetings, Kenneth, King of the Mountain, Matt R. A whole bunch of you guys snuck in. No convoluted attack matrices like MERP. Not around these.
Even worse than MERP was Rollmaster. They had even more of them.
MERP is just Rollmaster light.
Yeah, I mean, I've got no objection to that. I had great fun playing Rollmaster, but when I played, I had a sensible GM who he kept things moving. So like if you know where all the charts are, you can get to them quickly and decide things quickly. That's great. You can use all the rules so long as you know all the rules, and could just go boom, that's a +2, boom, that's a -1, whatever. And you rolled 88, that'll be stun, no parry, 3 rounds, bleeding at 2 per round, whatever. Then it works. But if you're spending all that time looking shit up, oh my god, no. And but of course, some things, whatever you do, will always be slow. Like with Phoenix Command offering rules to let you track. They give the example of the 2,000 different fragments of a fragmentation grenade.
Yeah.
Whatever. I jump on top of it. And save the rest of the party.
Unarmed Combat in first edition AD&D. I mean, I can tell you exactly where you can find it in the rule book. I could grab my Dungeon Master's Guide off the shelf behind me and flip to it right now. That doesn't mean that resolving it is going to be a quick process at all. Any of you guys,
how's it working with the monk rules, eh?
Yeah.
What if he's pummeling and then does a quivering palm? And
well, monk's not great, but it's not terrible. But it's not terrible like unarmed combat with like the wrestling moves. I mean, it's there if you want to use it, and I have used it before, but it's not great. It is not great.
I once punished a GM I had because he did the classic, like that stupid movie Cube or something. You start in a cell with no memory of how you got there, no clothes on, and no means of getting out, and that with the rest of the party. What do? It's like, well, we can't do anything, so fuck off. So I said, because there were NPCs there, so I said I wrestled them. It's like, you're going to punish us with tedium? I'm going to punish you back.
Punish you with as much tedium as you want.
So pretty soon, he got tired of resolving that, and then he had guards come in. So then we overpowered the guards with unarmed combat. We overpowered the guards and escaped, and things then became a bit more interesting. But we had to do that. I don't know what, like maybe there was a secret door or something. We were meant to press each of the 1,234 bricks in the room. I don't know. I don't know what the hell he expected us to do.
Yeah.
It's that sort of blank slate. But you could do anything. Well, no, I'm locked in a cell with no clothes on. I can't do anything.
When I when I was getting into D&D, I once thought, I would design a dungeon and I would make, hey, this was a long time before J.K. Rowling. Okay, I said, and before The Seventh Guest, the video game, The Seventh Guest, I said, I'm going to design the ultimate trap, man. This puzzle, not trap, but puzzle that the players have to get past. And I joined chess club at school. And what it's going to be is you're going to have to make certain moves on a chessboard. And the guys who were kind of teaching me role-playing games, they had been playing since the 70s. I remember one of them, Mark. Mark physically looked like the Cat Piss Man prototype. 300 pounds in the 80s when, everybody was doing coke and didn't weigh 380 pounds or 300 pounds. Iron Maiden t-shirts with the sleeves torn out, car filled up to the like halfway point with fast food garbage. But Mark just looked at me and shook his head and said, Sylvie, if you do that, you're going to have players leaving your table the minute you like turn around and pick up that chessboard and say, now to do, because apparently that was already a thing that game masters were doing. So I backed away from that and never looked forward at the aha, I'm so clever, I'll make you play chess puzzle in a D&D game again. And then it came up in the seventh guest and made me so mad I wanted to throw my monitor across the room.
GM Van comments that hand-to-hand combat seems to be difficult for most RPGs to handle both easily and successfully. Yes and no. Yes and no. What I think is that the main issue is that their melee combat, blades and blunt weapons, and their range combat, whether it be bows or firearms or whatever, most games don't handle that easily and successfully either. But the people around your game table are less likely to have experience of a sword fight or a firefight than they are to have experience of a fist fight. So they're going to be more critical of the fist fighting rules than they will be of the sword fighting or firefighting firefight rules.
Mm-hmm.
That's I think is the main thing. And the other thing about hand-to-hand combat is that it brings in a sort of a phobia that players have. Players would rather their character be horribly wounded or killed than disabled. Players absolutely hate for their character to be tied up or restrained in any way. Because you come down, you sit down at the game table so that your character can do stuff. Now, if your character's wounded, well, they can heal up later and do stuff. If their character's dead, well, you can roll up another character and that character can do stuff. If your character's tied up, you are stuck there until you escape or they free you, and you can't do anything except mouth off. So players have this phobia of being tied up, and the hand-to-hand combat offers that. Ranged or melee combat is only going to offer that if they chuck a net at you or something. So I think those two factors are the thing. So the first one is that players are more likely to have experience of fistfights compared to melee or firefights, and therefore they'll be more critical of the rules. And the second issue is the phobia of being restrained, or their character being restrained anyway.
By the way, that first of all, that was a good statement from GM Van, but I owe GM Van a bit of an apology. Those of you who stay through the end of the show, we have that wonderful song written for us by Bob Antone, Owlbear. There's a crawl there, and that's for patrons. It's for people who support the show on Patreon and support the show on they bought me a coffee, or they support the show on Subscribestar. GM Van is one of our newest patrons at the $10 mark, and I have not edited the end credits section to add you, sir, but thank you very much for supporting the show. Thank you very, very much. Miss Bella Games, greetings. Good to see you.
I still think you should rename the levels to be like hireling, henchman, and adventurer or something. I may do something like that. Link boy.
Link boy.
$1 a month. Link boy.
Yes, porter or bearer, perhaps.
Not anyway. To go into the dungeon.
But we appreciate all your support. And if you do want to support the show through Subscribestar or buy us a coffee or support the show on Patreon, all the info's down there on the bottom crawl. So you can do that. The best thing you can do is, if you're not subscribed to the channel, though, please click the subscribe button, click the bell icon for notifications. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and tell us what you like about it, and we'll keep doing it. Yeah, it's not like I'm busy or anything.
Kabuki Kid says that we're now 90 seconds to midnight on the Doomsday Clock. I hadn't heard that news. What is that? Is that because of the Ukraine war or because of AI, or they changed the recipe for McNuggets again or something?
It's a rash of. I don't know. Okay, so I know you guys have McDonald's in Australia. I think there's a McDonald's on like Bouvet Island, for crying out loud. There's McDonald's everywhere. But I don't know if this is an issue in Australia. Here in the United States, it is a meme, but it is also true. McDonald's have a serious problem with their ice cream machines. Their ice cream machines are constantly broken. So if you want to swirl cone, a little strawberry topping on it there, you might have to hit 3 or 4 McDonald's before you find one. And the thing about it is these things are engineered like an F-35, apparently, full of lots of moving parts that require specialist maintenance and maintaining.
No, maintenance. Not merely maintenance, but maintenization.
Maintenization, yes. So they've got a smaller staff of people going from store to store to fix these things, and it's not something you want to pay the kid who's making $7.50 an hour. Hey, I need you to shove your hand up into those 2 stainless steel rotating corkscrewing devices, and see if there's an ice buildup under there. So it's kind of this weird meme about ice cream at McDonald's here. Have you heard of such a thing down in your neck of the woods, Kyle?
Yeah. So I don't know if you still got, because I remember it was a thing when I was a kid that like you could just go up and pull your own ice cream sundae yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still like that in the US? Because it's not here.
Some of them. Okay. It depends on the neighborhood. There are certain neighborhoods where it's like absolutely neighborhoods where like you'll wait behind the laminated glass along with everyone else.
Okay. Well, even in the good neighborhoods, we don't have that now. I think there were too many gluttonous teenagers going in because you would do the 7-Eleven McDonald's run, like the 7-Eleven, the Slurpee, and you could do the same thing with the sundaes, straight in. So I think they got a bit disgusted by it, the staff, and it was too much for them. But they're broken. Yeah, it sort of just while we're on the subject of Doomsday, it makes me think. How in Zombieland, Woody Harrelson's character's going around looking for Twinkies. They survive the apocalypse. Maybe there'll be a character going around looking for this working Sunday machine.
Yes. What's that soft serve?
If you've got the working Sunday machine, you could just like trade Sundays for ammunition and spam or whatever you need in the post-apocalypse.
I mean, and it's not just finding the machine. You got to find a packet of the gel that actually turns into the ice cream. You got to find the machine. The machine, of course, has got to have intact coils and compressor and freon charge, and then you got to have the 220 volts of power to run it because it's an industrial appliance. So it could be quite.
Jimmy Victor says it's because all McDonald's are built over ancient burial grounds.
Now, I'd laugh harder at that, but given how many McDonald's they are, it is statistically impossible that there are not McDonald's built over ancient burial grounds.
I was just reading about that sort of thing. There's this magazine I subscribe to, New Maps. They do stories of like post-industrial society, not necessarily nuclear apocalypse or whatever, but just, you know, all the oil's run out, and so all climate changes happen, so things have fizzled out. This one's a more that normally is fairly grounded, but this one's a more magical one. And this guy's written an article about legend tripping, about at its most basic, a legend trip can be defined as an excursion to a place where something uncanny has happened. These legend trips are undertaken for the most part by adolescents, often under the influence of alcohol, marijuana, or other drugs. Footnote, with the use of hallucinogens, it becomes a real head trip. I'm not necessarily recommending this. So, they go to the place where, that's the drain where that kid drowned, but something had bitten off his leg. You know,
right.
The legend trip is a distinctly North American phenomenon. He gives a couple of stories. The Pits of Hell in Columbus, Ohio is one such spot. It is a large underground tunnel and drainage culvert in Clintonville Park. At the time of this writing, renamed Portal Park by users on Google Maps. The pit can be accessed with convenience from behind the parking lot of a Tim Hortons coffee shop. The place is also known as the Gates of Hell and the Blood Bowl. It is a massive industrial presence with huge steel I-beams at the mouth of a basin, at the bottom of which is a large drainage tunnel, all of it covered in tags and graffiti. The name Blood Bowl came to the place, according to the stories, when a local skateboarder died trying to do a stunt in the tunnel. When he failed to land his trick, he hit his head hard on the concrete and his blood was spattered everywhere. In the center of the tunnel is a chamber where it is said the more impressive pieces of graffiti art can be found. I can imagine this chamber being a popular place to get high and drink beer or cough syrup for teenagers, if teenagers are still allowed to sneak away from their helicopter parents long enough to do these things. In the town of York, Pennsylvania, is a place where there are not just one, but 7 gates of hell. Located on Trout Run Road, formerly named Toad Road. The place is associated with that modern form of barbarism known to the many as psychiatry. It is said that a lunatic asylum was once located off this road in the 1800s. When it caught fire, many of the inmates burned to death in the devouring flames, as firefighters couldn't reach it in time. Hundreds of others used the fire as their chance to escape into the woods. Search parties were sent to collect these poor souls who only wanted their freedom. The searchers were aggressive when they apprehended the escapees. Their heads had been filled by many stories of the violent and crazed behavior of the people locked away inside. The searchers were said to have beaten many of the escapees into submission, and those who wouldn't submit they murdered. As if the torture of these patients inside the asylum walls by dubious therapeutic techniques hadn't been enough, their subsequent deaths by fire and violence are said to have left a psychic stain on the land that led to the opening of these 7 gates of hell. The land home to the 7 gates gives would-be legend trippers a bit of trouble because they are located on private property. And it goes on like that. So, so there's many adventures to be had in real life. Just, don't get yourself drowned in a little tunnel somewhere and have your family blame it on D&D.
Exactly. One of the best. Those of you, and probably everybody knows what I'm talking about, but there's these little collections of short stories, and some of them are actually quite brilliant. And I think most of them can probably be, at least in an internet culture sense, be traced back to the original creepypasta, the story of Ted the Caver. Which, if you don't know that, seek it out, read it. It is legitimately creepy. It is a very, very well done story. But there's one that actually combines a real event and place, like it was something you could go and do. You can look this up, unusual places. Once upon a time, out in the American Southwest, and I believe it was in Arizona, possibly New Mexico, but it was in the middle of the desert, and it was called the Desert Telephone. And what it was is there was a phone booth. It was just a phone booth sitting in the middle of the desert. And it was a good distance from the highway. What it was is there was a mining and construction concern was brought into business in the late 1940s, and it lasted up to, I want to say, the early 1960s. And the only telephone was a phone booth, because the phone company realized, hey, these guys working out there are desperate to call home and what have you, will make a small fortune. So they put a phone booth out there. And eventually the concern packed up and went away, but the phone company left the desert phone booth out there. Now this was a real thing. Eventually the phone company said, well, it's become too much of a hassle to maintain, because you'd have tourists coming from all over the world. They'd find the desert phone booth and they'd say, oh, I'm just going to take the little plastic sign, But then the next person comes along, oh, I want the hand receiver, and so on. And they'd go out and they'd repair it. And then later people would come and it would get graffitied, everybody, Ivan was here from Germany, 1988, that sort of thing. But if you knew the number to the desert phone booth, you could call it, and you might get somebody. You might get someone on the phone, somebody camped out near the phone, and you could have a conversation with, again, somebody from somewhere out in the world. And it's been, people said, yeah, we called, and there was a guy who had been camped out there for a day, and he said, oh, good, this is great. And he played a 30-minute impromptu concert on acoustic guitar. And, or another guy, we talked to a bunch of Japanese tourists. We didn't speak Japanese. They didn't speak English, but it was a lot of fun. Well, there's a great creepypasta about that, where a group of friends goes out to the desert phone booth and camps out to wait for somebody to call. And as they've got their tent set up near the phone booth, and as they're camped out and the deep night comes, and all these dune buggies and motorcycles and jacked up pickup trucks start filing in and just sort of positioning themselves on the dunes around them. And then almost at a signal, they all start up their engines and start revving their engines and switch on their floodlights. And, it's this cacophony, and these, the narrator's talking about how worried they are, about how scared they are. And, now there's cars across the little dirt road that leads there. And so what do we do? And so the guy's like, hey, there's a phone. I'll go call the local sheriff. And he goes over and he, oh, hey, Volcano God, greetings. So he goes over, and just as he's about to pick up the phone to dial the local, the county sheriff, it rings, and he picks it up and says, hello. And the voice on the other end says, we'll give you and your friends a 10-minute head start. I love that story. I'm not doing it any good justice there, but it is a great little read. Obviously, that's a creepypasta, but it's a creepypasta built on an actual real place. They didn't invent something like, there's a town in northern Maine, you never heard of it, and you won't find it if you look for it. No, the desert phone booth was really there, and you can look it up. I do wonder about Australia, because you guys have got a couple of Texases and a few New Mexicos of empty space in between your coastal cities. I do wonder if there's not
that's what the celebrity criminal Chopper Reed used to say. Be careful who you annoy, because Australia is big and shovels are cheap.
GM Van, that's right. The Carabella, Florida police station was just a phone booth for many years, because of course it's in Florida. But Yeah, I wonder if there's a desert phone booth. Well, I guess it's an outback phone. Well, you guys have desert and the outback.
There's bound to be. There's a few abandoned towns. I mean, the same as the US, like old gold rush towns, or like copper mining or something like that. In the area got mined out, and so the place got abandoned. Decades ago. The really nasty ones are the former asbestos mining towns, and then there's the occasional place. I don't see the articles anymore. The people must have died off, but it was sort of articles about the last 3 people living in whoop whoop asbestos mining town, because once the government started settling with everyone and all the mining companies compensating everyone for the asbestosis, they started people, but I can't move. That's all right. We'll buy your property from you at a fair price, and then you can go and move somewhere else closer to the city where you can get medical care. But some people refuse to move. No, we like it here out in the middle of the desert next to the asbestos mine. And so you used to get these articles in the news about the last 3 residents of Whoop Whoop asbestos mining town. And the other place, all the rest is all sort of collapsed and fallen over, and maybe there was a bit of a Mad Max movie set left over there or something.
It's like you've got Centralia. You've heard of Centralia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the mine fire that has been going for 40 years and will probably burn for another 300 years. There's still like 14 people that live in that town that have fought tooth and nail to be allowed to live in that town. What the hell for? The ground under you is on fire. Like, you could step out your front door one day and just literally be sucked into a vortex of hell. It's, I gotta tell you, I really like Longwood, Florida. If somebody said the ground under you is on fire or it's full of asbestos, I'd be like, too bad we can't stay, baby. Let's take that government buyout and go get us a house elsewhere. I don't understand. There was a town in Missouri. And this happened in the 50s. Of course, everybody knows the horrible substance dioxin and the dreadful things it can do to you. But the town was unincorporated, so they didn't get paved roads for a long time. And so to stop the dust from the interminably hot and interminably long Missouri summers from coating everything, they sprayed oil on the dirt roads to make a nice soft tarry substance. They do that many times, and the oil was waste oil and it was loaded with dioxin. The government ended up having to take everyone in the town and move them and buy everything, and there is no town of Times Beach anymore. It's gone. I again, call me a rootless cosmopolitan. I just don't see myself ever going, but I want to live. No, I want to live, period.
Well, speaking of rootless cosmopolitans, it makes me think of the classic Traveller Party. So the various Jameses that have been asking about this, Jimmy and James, Ray, and that asked, yes, the Traveller ended. So there were just 3 episodes in the 3rd and final season. And it basically ended because the crew had killed off all their enemies, and they confused or got ahead of the feds, so to speak, so that they were at worst one jump ahead of the federal marshals chasing them and everyone else, all the others who might want to chase them. So we could have played on, but it might have been a bit kind of jumping the shark. And I always aim to play close-ended campaigns because I'd rather finish when everyone's still hungry for more than just to keep stretching it out. People get sick of it and drift off. This came about. Doing the close-ended campaigns came about Firstly, because of family limitations, because I'm the primary one looking after the kids. So I tended to just run games during the school terms, 10 to 12 week school terms with 2 weeks off in between. And that seemed like a natural time to turn over. And it also came about because years ago on RPG.net, I did a cable TV could learn a thing about that from you, Kyle. Yeah, not stretching things out forever. Yeah, we've discussed that many times.
Yes.
Lots of shows go on just too long. And then others that were promising get cut short. Role-playing campaigns are just the same. It's just human nature. But yeah, so I did a poll on RPG.net and said, what's the average campaign length that you've had? Whether the campaign ended because you'd killed the big bad evil guy, or you just couldn't play together anymore for whatever reason. And I said exclude one session fizzles, the session zero where you just get together and you create characters, but then the game never actually happens. But when people did their replies, they obviously weren't excluding them. Anyway, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like 6 to 10 sessions was the average of most people's campaigns. So there's the occasional outlier, like Bill's one's going for a decade or something, and then there's a whole stack of those session zero fizzles. But the average, where they actually stayed together long enough to do something and enjoy themselves, was 6 to 10 sessions. So I thought like 10 or 12 is a good number, because I also remembered things like a friend talking about this GURPS campaign or something like that, and it's saying, "What? That's still going? If I'd known it was going to go on for so long, I would have quit sooner." So people are more likely to stick around if they know it's going to end on date X or after so many sessions, because they might be like, I've had a bad session or two, and they might normally go, "Oh, fuck this, I'm off." But if they know that it's going to end in another 3 or 4 sessions, they go, "Oh, look, I'll stick around. I'll finish it. And they finish it, and then they have 1 or 2 good sessions, and that sort of balances things out. So I found I got greater, not adherence, that's more of a gym term, but, better attendance. I got better attendance when I had people, I said it's going to be 10 or 12 sessions. And I also learned from another game master I had who, like, every 4th session of his regular campaign was not the campaign, but it was do something different. Like, so they'd watch a movie, or they'd play a board game, or someone else would run a one-off or something like that. So it kind of keeps it fresh. And so after 10 or 12 sessions, you finish it. And if you have the sense that there are things unfinished, you want to keep going, great. You have a break of a couple of weeks, you come back to it and you do that. But if you want to do something different, you want the game master to run something different, or you want to run a game yourself, or you want to move on and go to another game group or whatever, you can go ahead and do that. So it makes it nice. So we reached that point in the Traveller game. The guys the crew had killed off the Ballard, the criminal who'd escaped from the Cold Sleep 30 or 40 years before in that ship that they found. They'd killed him off and his associates. They had killed off the Josephite ship that was chasing them with the AI that they artificial intelligence that they discarded. And not only killed it off, but vaporized it after themselves sending a Mayday message. So anyone investigating might have thought that the crew themselves were all gone and dead. So all their major enemies were defeated and behind them. There's still the federal police who are a bit curious about this, and once they realise that a ship has been plumed, they'll be curious about that too. But again, it's Traveller, so communication is only at the speed of the fastest ship. So it basically takes a couple of weeks for news to get between each system. So as long as you keep moving, and you never go back to a place that you've been to before, they'll never find you. They'll never find you. If you stop in one place, they might catch up. If you go back to somewhere you've been before, then they might go, "Hey, aren't you that guy who?" and get you. But if you keep moving, don't look behind and don't slow down, they'll never catch you. And of course, there'd be more adventures to have, but it would have been a sort of a new campaign in that sense, that there would be new enemies to fight and all the rest. It sort of like a new bunch of stories, really. So it seemed like a natural time to stop.
Well, it was a hell of a slam bang campaign, and I mean, speaking for myself, I know I had a lot of fun, and it seemed like everyone else did too. And I agree with you. I think there are campaigns that can go long enough. Like I've talked a lot about the Monday night game. The that thing's been going since 2014 now. The Monday night AD&D campaign, that's not one I stream, in case you guys are like, the heck's he talking about? But that's been going for a really long clip, and I would say the main part of it's probably been going for closer to 7 years. But I feel like you can run a campaign for long enough that it kind of takes on a life of its own, and it's rather a comfortable thing that people enjoy. I mean, it's like watching, it's here in the States, Monday Night Football, of course, has run for decades. It will run for decades more, and people will watch it and enjoy it, and so there's a sense of, tautology almost. We do this because we do this, which is not to express disinterest in the game, but I think by and large, there's probably a vast gulf between that and the short campaign. That is an area of campaigns that overstay their welcome.
Yeah, there is. What's his name? Seth something or other. I've forgotten what his name is. He does all this sort of these pithy little blog articles.
Seth Green, Seth Green.
I can't remember his name. Seth, but anyway, so that you'll probably recognise him if I just put the blog link up. Anyway, he does all. And he's got some book that I just read casually called The Dip, and he talked about how in developing a skill like doing a uni degree or in expanding a business or whatever, there inevitably, so you've got that sort of little period of progress, and then you have this sort of dip where things turn a bit crappy. And he says, if you can overcome that dip, then you can rise to greater heights than you had achieved before then. But it's kind of hard to overcome that dip, that little trough, and then to keep the progress going. So I think that's probably what you're talking about, that like between the 6 to 10 session successful ones and the decade-long successful ones, it's probably quite a dip, and it's probably quite hard to achieve. I think, you need a pretty steady group for the longer ones as well. And I think that's one advantage of the short, close-ended ones. So even if people can't, like if you sit someone's down and say, okay, we're going to play this campaign and it's going to take 5 years. How many people are going to sign up for that? You're like, can't I just try it for a bit and see if it's any good? No, you can't. You have to. We're presenting you with a contract. And by the way, it's a game system and a setting that you know nothing about, but you've got to sign up for it for 5 years.
I mean, even Bilbo, they said, hey, look, you're going to help us get to the dragon, and then we're going to pay you off. It wasn't like, hey, we're going to hire you. For how long?
Yes.
Even Bilbo, they gave a set of, even Gandalf gave Frodo, it's like, well, you gotta take the ring somewhere. Okay, well, go to Rivendell. Oh, I'm in Rivendell. Yeah, it's not safe here. Eventually, it won't be. All right, I'll go to Mordor. And that was it. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. James says it was fun to watch, and I hope you do another. You are another GM, runs another old school sci-fi RPG. It's curious if Bogo was going to shoot the prisoner. No, I don't think that was Bogo. I think you're crossing the streams, because Tonka played in both games. He's in Friday Night Traveler, Friday Night Gamma World, although Bogo is no more go. Bogo no go. He is. But yeah, I was going to be interesting to see if Bubba was going to air out the science lady. Hey, doctor lady who ain't a real doctor.
Jimmy says, I think the biggest hurdle to campaign longevity is social commitment to a degree, but from my experience running a gym, people make the time for the things that they feel is important to them. Because I've known people who are just insanely busy, who they had work, they had children, and they're studying at uni, and they still came to the gym. They didn't push themselves really hard at the gym, but they still showed up. The ones who push themselves really hard at the gym are the ones who just have one other thing, like just work or just family or just study or something. But you can't push yourself in multiple areas at once. So I think the social group or hobby thing, like role playing, is just the same as gym. If it's important to people, they'll find time to do that. And quite often, it's the most dedicated players are the ones who are the busiest with other things. The ones who aren't that busy tend not to be as dedicated, oddly enough. So I think it's more kind of the individual's personality. Is that a person who kind of has their shit together and organizes everything? Like I trained this investment advisor who's quite well known here in Australia. He's got a top-selling book and that. And when he had he gave it all away just to become a volunteer financial counselor. But when he had the larger company, he commented to me he liked hiring mothers. He said they get more done working part-time than the young single guys do getting working full-time. He said, his words, they just don't have time to fuck around. So they got a lot done. And I've seen the same in the gym. And I think it's the same with game groups. So it's just our job, my job as a trainer, or my job as a game master or a fellow player, to try to make things so enjoyable and worthwhile to the person that they think it's worth setting aside other things in their life to come and do this. I mean, I know that the game wasn't always a convenient time and place for the gamers in the recent Traveller campaign, but we tried to make it fun enough that they wanted to keep coming back, and it seemed like only sickness and work kept them from it, for which I'm very grateful. I'm grateful for the commitment, because the presence of every player there that we had made a difference. We were very fortunate with that game group. We didn't have any kind of deadbeat freeloader types who just sat in the corner and did nothing. Everyone contributed, and so I'm very grateful for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, and this is a little inside baseball. And I don't, Kyle and I have never discussed this before. So Kyle, if you didn't feel this was a factor at all, but I mean, at the end of the day, the Delver's Dungeon is my jam, and I have Kyle's assistance with it, for which I'm eternally grateful. So sitting back and letting someone else run a game and another 5 people sit in and play that game and not doing host stuff, just playing the game, but on my own channel, was a phenomenal relief for me. That one night a week I can come in here, I can sit there. Yeah, I got some Switchology, and I gotta yell big thanks to the people who super chat. Like if anyone wants to super chat right now, for example.
Send me money. Not Bill, send me money.
Send Kyle money too. Honestly, if you guys are like, I want this to be for Kyle, and you super chat me, I will make sure he gets it. Don't worry. But it's been a sagacious blast to be able to sit back and 5 other people playing an RPG, and I'm not running it because I do a 3-hour AD&D on Monday night. I do a 2-hour AD&D on Tuesday night, and I do a 2-hour Gamma World on Friday nights. So, and I periodically
many hours of DMing.
Yeah. I'm not Jorge, I'm not the eternal DM quite at all. And Drone Swarm, you point out very correctly, some chemistry in the personalities is important too. Sure.
Michael said when he realized he couldn't give it his undivided attention, he bowed out. I don't think it requires undivided attention. I don't think players don't have to be there every single session. I mean, life happens. You don't have to be there every single session. You don't have to read a 128-page setting book or any nonsense like that. You just have to show up more often than not. I mean, every game group's going to have that. There was a little poll on Twitter the other day saying, what's the ideal number for a game group, and I ticked the 6 to 8 box, and I said I ticked the 6 to 8 box only because I think it's actually like 4 or 5. But if you have 6 to 8, but you're always going to have one guy who's super keen but then never shows up, and then one guy who sort of shows up about half the time and usually remembers to bring snacks, and then another one who shows up most of the time but is really quiet and doesn't say or do much except roll the dice when you tell them to. So if you have nominally 6 to 8 players, then in practice you'll have 4 to 5 around the game table fairly regularly, and at the absolute worst you'll have 3, and you can still go ahead and achieve something in the game session. So yeah, we try to be easygoing about this stuff.
Very, very much so. Drone Swarm here. The contrast between improv theater actors and general issue players was significant. The theater types were scary, led the game down their own paths. I mean, I think what I've run into before is particularly with players is that, and this surprised me when I became a forever DM. I mean, really invested in the craft. Obviously, when I was a kid running D&D, because I was the only kid that had a D&D book. It's a little different when you're 10 or 11 years old and when you're 50 years old. But I was really surprised to find that there are people, they really like RPGs. They do have fun doing them, and when they sit down, they're just they clam up, and they just sit there and okay, what's your character doing? I'm going to attack. Okay, roll your attack. 18. Okay, you hit. All right. And I would often.
They're the players. They're the players who, after the campaign, go, "Oh, that was awesome, man!"
Yeah, exactly. Many was the time I would ask people, not out of a sense of get the hell away from my table, but a sense of man, am I really tanking here? Am I really bombing? And I'd say, okay, let's 5 minutes for a soda, guys. Let's stretch our legs. If you want to have a smoke break, I'm going to grab a bottle of water, etc. And say, hey, you having fun? And they'd be like, oh yeah, yeah. And then after, the feedback would come along like, I'm so glad you had person A, Tom over there. It was so fun to watch him role play and really kind of help us along. So basically, you've got a lead dog on the sled, and you've got people who are perfectly happy to run fourth place in the harness.
Yeah.
And they have just as much fun as everyone else does.
Yep.
So don't make the assumption if you've got a group of 8 and 2 people are interacting and role playing heavily and the other 6 are just kind of, that they're being overwhelmed. Now, sometimes they might be. I have had a smaller percentage of people, but it merits mentioning that, I've had people say, yeah, your game was okay, but, seemed like everything I wanted to do, Tom thought of first or had a better idea. So I just never felt compelled to speak up. So it seemed like so it's a fine balance to strike, but generally speaking, I find that it's always the quiet ones who are actually having a blast, and you find out about it after the fact.
Well, it reminds me of that thing I think I've mentioned before. So there's this strength training guy, Dave Tate, who he played football, and that's how he got into strength training. Later became a coach, strength coach, not a football coach. Runs elite fitness training systems. They produce a lot of articles and supplements and equipment and all the rest. Anyway, he talked about his high school football coach, this great guy, had him for 4 years. And then one day, there's Tate. He's never done really well in school, but there's Tate at the community college, and he comes out into the car park, and his old football college coach happens to be there. And the coach says, how's it going, Dave? And Dave says, oh, not too well. I'm struggling a bit. And the coach sort of goes, thinks for a bit and says, the thing is, Dave, you're not stupid. You're just lazy. And Tate said that if anyone else had said that to him, he probably would have decked them. But because it was this guy that he had this, long relationship of respect with, he took it on board, and he went off and he redoubled his efforts, and he did a lot better then at community college, and then was able to go to a regular college, and do well for himself and build a business and all the rest. And so he went back sometime later, and he thanked him. And I watched a little interview podcast between Tate and this coach, and he said to the coach about this, and the coach said, "Yeah, the thing is, Dave, I don't even remember that conversation." And he said, okay, how many students do you think you've had over the years? And he said, well, I've been a teacher for 35 years, so probably over 10,000. And he said, how many people have come back and thanked you? And he said, 3, 4, maybe 5, counting you. And he said, do you think you have profoundly affected the lives of more than 5 people out of those 10,000? And he said, well, I sure as hell hope so. After 35 years. And so Tate's point was, if somebody's profoundly affected your life, that you should go back and thank them, all the rest. But I discussed, after I'd watched this, I discussed this with teachers that I knew. And they said the same thing. Not many people come back and thank them. And they said, but what one did observe, and the others confirmed, was, okay, you get this student who's really struggling in school, so you spend all this extra time with them and you help them a lot. That's not the one who comes back years later and thanks you. The one who comes back years later and thanks you is the one who was sitting quietly in the back of the class. And when they come back and thank you, you don't actually remember who they were. Those 10,000 students. But something you said at some point was just at the right time. It was that you rolled for that critical success and it hit them and just bang. So you never really know what's going on in somebody's head. That, you might think they're having this wonderful time and they're a bit bored or pissed off. And you might think that, he's all quiet, so he's, discontent. But so you can never know. I mean, really, the main measure of success is as you are the game master, are you enjoying yourself? And after that, do they show up to the next session? If they keep showing up to the sessions, you're doing something right. And don't sweat it too much.
Yeah, that perception for game masters sweating it too much. I mean, this is this is something that I think, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of psychology, pop psychology, 10 column inches in Women's Day magazine level stuff. But I think we can all get wrapped up sometimes, particularly if we're GMing for the first time, in kind of a sense of imposter syndrome where, you kind of you grab the brown paper bag and stop yourself from hyperventilating before the game starts. And, you're like, do I suck? Is this any good? And it's something that I struggle with constantly. I will tell you guys, I have a moderately successful YouTube channel. I don't, it's not a huge success. I mean, but for Wizards of the Coast self-own, I've still got 1,300 subs. And I run the live streams. Two nights a week I game master. I've convinced Kyle to game master for me, and I've got a game with 11 people that's been going for almost a decade on Monday night. By any measure of, do you think you're a good game master? People would say, well, oh my God, yes, he must be. And I'll sit out here and I'll tell you guys, I'm a damn good Dungeons and Dragons game master. I'm a pretty good Gamma World, but I'm a damn good Dungeons and Dragons DM. And there's the the monkey on my back of self-doubt going, no, you're not. You're terrible. You bore people. You're unoriginal. You stumble. If you put together a book of all the times you said, hang on a minute, guys, it would be 5 copies of The Lord of the Rings in length. It's just something. It's just the persistent. I think Kyle was talking about something, and it's the black dog, and it stalks you like an invisible horse at all hours of the day and night when you think about it. But the fact of the matter is, I know objectively, I've had as many as a dozen people on Monday night who want to play in the D&D game. I've run games at conventions that got to the point where there were waiting lists to join my games because I ran essentially over the course of 4 years, one campaign as convention games at a local con. You guys like to watch. And yet subjectively, again, that's just something I struggle with. Is that a thing with you? Of course, it's not a thing with you.
It is a thing with me. But my thing is, it doesn't matter if I'm a bit crap. My experience is that role-playing games is like sex. Enthusiasm is more important than skill.
Oh, thank God! I thought you were going to say something completely different. I just have to slice out a massive section of the live stream. Go ahead.
No, enthusiasm is more important than skill. That's what you don't want anyone who just starfishes, right? You want people who get into it. It's just one is better one-on-one. I'm not into that whole group thing. But yeah, The other's better than the group.
Yeah, I am going to have to edit.
I'll leave it up to you guys to decide which is which. But yeah, look, I'm a bit crap. I plagiarize ruthlessly. I copy all this stuff and stick it together, and I make up 9/10 of it on the spot. But it doesn't matter because, like, in the end, the players keep showing up. The players keep showing up, and even if part of why they show up is they think I could do a slightly better job as DM, but then I'd have to DM. So I'd rather just be a player, even if that's all that keeps them in the game. That's still good enough to me, and we have fun. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be brilliant. We're not creating high art here. We're not trying to be Michelangelo. Michelangelo's of role-playing games. We're just trying to have fun. It's essentially a social thing. You don't confuse your Friday night poker game with your friends or your tennis match with your squash match with your buddy or whatever with like competitive level stuff. You're just trying to have fun. So, you don't put too much weight on yourself about it. And if it fails dismally, well, there's always another session. At least half of them will show up again and give you a go. There's always another session. There's always another more players. So
yeah. And I mean, Dark Saint, that's absolutely true. All GMs struggle with some sort of self-doubt when running their games. Just the more often you run the games, the more you run face first into the self-doubt, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, nobody's going to be as critical of your game as DM as you are. It's the same like your physics. Nobody's going to be as critical about your body as you are.
Mm-hmm.
You do a piece of writing, nobody is going to be as critical of the writing as you are. You make a meal, nobody's going to be as critical of that meal as you are. Because you made it, so you know every tiny little detail of it, and you will focus on what's wrong with it rather than what's right with it. Whereas others who have been given it are going to focus on what's right with it. They're going to focus on the positive attributes of it. And they don't know it in that much detail. You sit there and you read a book and you probably, unless you're an editor, you're not going to notice there were typos in it or clumsy sentences or whatever. If you were an editor, if you sat there and copied out the book by hand or something, you would notice these things. But most people aren't going to notice it. So the same goes for being a game master. And, the best thing to do is, King of the Mountain says, what's you guys to learn? The best way to learn is just to get up there and start running it.
Yeah, I mean, you're not. With one single exception, nobody has ever been called to be in a massive rock band and thrown up on stage for the first time in front of tens of thousands of fans to perform. You get up there, and if you have a group of friends or even a group of friendly people, the thing about the RPG horror stories. And by the way, I'm gonna get back to the Tales of Tabletop Triumph, don't worry, but those are really the exceptions to the rules. They really are. And I personally, I think half of them are just made up bullshit anyway. But no, the horror stories, that is. I just feel like you just get up and give it a try. Now, taking notes, that's perfectly okay. I've had people like in real life be like, okay, I know your table's full. Can I just sit? Because this was at one of the con events. They're like, I really want to get a feel for how you do this. And the guy was super grateful and had jotted down a bunch of notes. And I hope he hit it out of the park, whether he had a bunch of Dwarven Forge and miniatures or he just did Theater of the Mind. I hope that helped him, but you're right. That does. And I got to interject this. This is just completely has nothing to do. Well, I mean, no, it kind of has something to do with improv. Famously, in it was either the late 1960s or the early 1970s, the Who were performing in the Midwest. I think it was Iowa, possibly Kansas. And the night before, their drummer, Keith Moon, famous for his excess, had taken like 4 horse tranquilizers and washed them down with a glass of bourbon, and was fine for most of the concert, except for the last 15 minutes. He fell unconscious and couldn't be revived. They just decided to kick in right then. Probably when the cocaine wore off, the ketamine kicked in. But Pete Townsend wanted to finish the concert rather than leave them with, 15 minutes. So he asked for volunteers from the audience. You have to be able to play drums. So there was this 30-minute crash audition session, and this young man came up there, and he said, in the retelling of the story, that Townsend like grabs him and brings him close. There's like no microphones or anything around us here, and said, "You'd better fucking know how to play and don't bullshit me." And he said, "I can play." So they take him over to the drum kit. They sit him down, and he said, "Roger Daltrey handed me this water glass full of what I thought was apple juice, and said, 'Drink all this.' And he drank it and realized it was bourbon." And he went through the whole set. He did the last 5 or 6 songs of their set because he knew the Who songbook because he was a huge fan. And that sometimes you've got to be that kid. You've got to step up, maybe not under those circumstances and certainly not in front of 15, 20,000 people. But you've just got to knock back the metaphorical glass of bourbon, step up on stage and say, "I know how to do this. I've listened to all your albums." I mean,
the audience of 15 to 20,000 are going to be far more critical. But a game group of 4 or 5 people, they're not going to be that critical. They're not. As I said, you're going to be your own worst critic. And that's not just a tired old cliche. It really is true. They're going to go with it. They're going to accept that you don't know all the rules. They're going to accept that you're making some things up on the spot. It's you don't have to pretend to be all prepared or whatever. They'll cut you slack. They won't mind, because what's their alternative? DMing themselves? They'd rather be a player. Yeah, as King on the Mountain says, most people are just grateful to play. Absolutely true. So
yeah, I mean, at the end of the,
we've got our Discord. We've been offering a bit of advice recently on how to play. Here we go. Copy a link. I'll send the Discord link. We've been talking about that. Vincent in particular has been asking about generating cities and things like that. So we've talked about the importance of doing it randomly and then fleshing it out afterwards. So yeah, we can advise on ways to make it easier and the creative burden a bit less, the paperwork burden a bit less. But in the end, you just got to step up there, take your swig of bourbon, and start playing the drums, as Bill said.
Yeah. And by the way, the young man's name was who was this? Scott Halpin. In 1973, a fan in the Who concert audience replaces Keith Moon. November 20th, 1973, at the Cow Palace. Oh, no, it was in San Francisco. Maybe it was the Cow Palace part that made me think it was somewhere in the Midwest. With a fan behind the drums, a legendary excessive Keith Moon collapsed after his drink was spiked with horse tranquilizer. Yeah, by him. Unable to keep up with the show, Moon had to be taken off stage, and the Who decided to keep on. To be able to do that, they invited anyone in the audience who knew how to drum. The chosen volunteer was a 19-year-old Scott Halpin that helped the band finish their last 3 songs. Halpin later stated that he admired the Who's stamina, admitting, "I only played 3 numbers and I was dead." Unfortunately, Scott passed away in 2008. I remember hearing an interview with him. He talked about what he got paid was an unopened bottle of Jack Daniels, a huge bottle of Jack Daniels, a set of drumsticks, and a tour jacket. Someone gave him a tour jacket, all of which were literally removed from his person when he was backstage at the show. Had the drumsticks in his back pocket, felt a little, yep, and those were gone. set the bottle of Jack Daniels down, turned, and it was gone. And he felt somebody take the jacket off his shoulders in the crush of people backstage. So
he didn't get offered a job in a band after that or anything, though. Not the Who, but some other band.
I would say that'd be a hell of a resume that he could have stuck with.
Because nowadays that's what people are after, that sort of break. That's why they have those TV shows, The Voice and stuff like that.
Yeah. But
nowadays that would be on Instagram, and you'd now have 5 million followers.
Yeah, right. I mean that would be like a phenomenon, and now it's just like one of those weird friggin' things that happened to the Who back in the 60s or 70s.
Yeah, it sounds like for him it was just a cool story. And probably half the people he told it to, who weren't fans of the Who, didn't believe him.
Kabuki points out, nowadays you have a drum tech who knows how to play the set. I saw Queensryche on their Operation Live Crime tour in 91, I think, or 92. And our seats were located such that we were just above and behind the sound pit. And I don't think they realized that their barrier wasn't enough. There was a drummer with a full drum set. They were synth drums, so they were small, so they didn't need the full drum kit. But he basically played the entire show. And there was a keyboardist. There was a keyboardist playing all the synth stuff that the lead singer of the band was supposedly playing. I thought that was kind of amusing. I wasn't scandalized. I was just like, well, there you go. Oh, thank you, Drone Swarm. I can tell a story. It's not a skill everyone has. Most GMs don't. It depends on musical talent to an extent, the melody, pace, and tension. Okay. Thank you. Again, that's the imposter part seeping in. Kyle was talking about...
I think it's a lot of practice. Your practice will be mostly gaming, and the storytelling skill that I have, such as it is, comes from... goes all the way back to high school, talking a lot of shit with my mates. So, but since then, working in, being in teaching type roles, like in the gym and so on, people are resting between sets, and it just gets boring. So you've got 2 basic options: you talk about them, or you tell a story. And I didn't want to talk about them because I don't want to be somebody's counselor. They do a set of squats and then tell me that they're unhappy in their marriage or something. I don't want to hear that shit. It's depressing, and it'll make them weaker for the next set. So I'd just tell them some story, which might be true or not, doesn't matter, as long as it's entertaining. That plus a lot of reading books and a lot of writing essays and things.
Yeah. But I guess being the storyteller, and this is something I love saying this. I was talking to Gary Gygax about this very topic, that was the tiny bit of gaming that came up in our conversation when I had my wife and I had dinner with he and Gail in Lake Geneva the last time I was up there. He was still with us, and he talked about like making up stories and telling stories to his kid, and how much that his kids, excuse me, and how much that played into into what became Dungeons and Dragons. And I mean, it really is. Can you tell a good story? You know, and if you can tell a good story, if you can, you know, if you can, look, forget this, okay? Forget these weird ass dice and the extra d6s for fireballs you cribbed from Sorry and Monopoly, okay? Can you tell a good story? Is ultimately what it comes down to. And look, don't come at me, and I know Kyle's not going to, but don't come at me with, you mean story gaming? No, I don't mean story gaming.
We don't do story gaming.
We don't do story gaming.
Still exist. I haven't looked for years.
You know, that's one of those things like the back end print project and Dragon's Foot and Edition Warring that it's in a storage space somewhere up here that the bill hasn't been paid on, and I'm not going to go and cut the lock off to see what kind of crap is in there anymore.
Indie-rpgs.com. Yeah, it still exists.
Mm.
It still exists. Oh, hang on. No, it might have been all archived because they got last post June 1st, 2012, May 30th, 2012.
Funny that.
It's got archived, so it seems to have died.
Yeah.
Universalis and Lumpley Games, Dogs in the Vineyard, and all that sort of nonsense. Yeah, it seems to have died. How sad.
Yeah, I still, to this day, I still think the funniest, like one of the most Whiskey Tango Foxtrot moments. Oh, and by the way, throwing that little link in there, we unfortunately we can't. Come on, copy image address. We can't just throw images into our chat, but there, that's my feeling on the Forge. But one of the most ridiculous things, this was over at the RPG site, was when Ryan Dancy showed up out of nowhere to tell all of us classic D&D players that the proper way to play Greyhawk was using Dogs in the Vineyard. Classic Dungeons and Dragons has no mechanisms for role play. It is a war game. And then I pointed out.
Yeah, so somebody innocently asks what is story games. You're privileged not to know. So story games essentially came out of the idea that the point of role-playing games is to play a story, is to create a story from the interactions of the different roles of your characters, and therefore the game mechanics should support that. So you don't merely decide that your character is a bad-tempered drunken barbarian or something. You have stats to say that he has a bad temper. You know, your bad temper 3 and wine-soaked barbarian 4, whatever. And so when you do something, you roll against that, and you let those dice decide. And one of their systems, you had an escalating ladder. When you had a conflict with someone, basically it would start off as just staring each other down, and then you could choose to escalate on the ladder of you go, oh, and if you escalated then and he didn't, then you'd win. But you'd escalate from stare down to heavy words to nastier words to punching to wrestling to stabbing and shooting him and then setting fire to his corpse and pissing on his grave or something. But anyway, if you escalated, you'd win. But by escalating, of course, there were nastier consequences. So the idea was to take that sort of role playing that people do. You know, this is what my character is going to do, because this is the kind of person my character is, and give that actual game mechanics. And it sort of bound them. They decided that was the point of it, which was sort of an interesting idea and maybe had some validity, but it got really pretentious and really stupid. And they tied it into GNS, this big theory of it was supposed to be a grand unified theory of gaming. There was a gamist approach to gaming, and the narrativist approach to gaming, and the simulationist approach to gaming, or role-playing games. And they had this whole series of essays about it, and they were all complete bollocks. It was people who thought that they were doing some sort of postgraduate thesis in role-playing games, and they didn't have the breadth or depth of experience to really get what was happening. So it was this long, rambling, self-contradictory piece of shit. And the people involved in it were often quite obnoxious about how they presented things. So, and it faded away and died because nobody wanted to buy the games they sold anyway. So.
Yeah, no. I mean, some of what I saw coming out of story gaming was it's like, yeah, okay, broadly, you take a D&D game. Let's pretend you're a wizard, you're a knight, you're a thief, you're a holy man, and you're going to go fight orcs like in Tolkien. Okay, that's fine. The story games that I saw, never played in, maybe that's to my detriment, I don't know, were you're a baker working in post-war Belgium. It is 1949. You're having an argument with your wife over finances and whether or not you should accept the USAID food packages or join the local Communist Party. It's called The Baker's Kitchen, and you role play sitting in the kitchen having an argument with your wife. You guys will play the baker and his wife's children, and you'll sit there, and you're all sitting around the table, and that's what you do. And if you wish to escalate, we call it baking a bun, in which you will have to go into the actual kitchen here and bake a piece of bread and then bring it. And I was just like, what? Look, do you guys want to have fun? Because what even is this?
If I'm the baker, I cast Fireball immediately, says Luther.
Luther, I'm with you, brother.
A lot of the games, though, went pretty dark and nasty. And I think basically because the issue was when you put all these mechanics into the role-playing side of the game, because you've got the role-playing and the game, right? And if you put the role-playing, if you make the game the role-playing itself, you put all these bounds on it, and it becomes kind of restricted, and players get bored. So the only way to make it more interesting is to either raise the stakes and people get killed, but then the game master says, now roll for PTSD.
Yeah.
After blowing someone's brains out, so you end up going darker. And so that's why you've got game titles like Kill Puppies for Satan, stuff like that. Or one of the story games I saw wasn't associated with the Forge. It was from Sweden called We All Had Names. And in We All Had Names, you play a bunch of Jewish people in occupied Europe hiding out in a house somewhere, fearing that the Nazis are going to come and take you off to death camps. And it's just so awful and depressing. And
why would you ever? And I mean,
but Sweden also had the LARP where they all got together in a bunker in the woods for the weekend and pretended that there'd been a nuclear war. And they weren't allowed to go out and forage for supplies or anything interesting like that. They just had to sit around and feel angst about 4 billion people dying or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm going to answer your question in just a second. I wanted to stick it on the screen there, Luther. Just my last mention of the Forge. In tank design theory, there is what is called the triangle: armor, or protection, mobility, and firepower. The goal is to try and get in the middle of the triangle, because if you move to any one of the points, you draw away from the other point. You want a faster tank, less armor, lower caliber gun. You want a bigger gun, less armor, less engine. You want lots of armor, you get less mobility and less firepower. It's just the nature of the beast. RPGs are like that. You have combat, role play, and I guess fun would be the other one. And you want to try and stay in the middle of the triangle. The Forge wants to push you all the way up to role play. They are the ultimate. You're not here to have fun. You're here to role play crowd. I remember, now he wasn't a fan of that, but that guy, James Raggy, once famously posted this polemic about, I don't play role playing games to have fun, and people that have fun role playing are ruining the role playing hobby. Fuck you. Fuck off. Get out of my hobby. Anyway, so Luther, have I ever done solo adventure games? Yes, I have. Now, this may be cheating a little bit.
Hang on, we've got there's a classic. Just briefly, so Jeffrey Entz did a parody of the threefold theory, and he said it's not gaming, narrativism, and simulationism. It's retro, stupid, and pretentious.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, that's the better one. Sorry, you go on.
Anyway, so solo adventures. When I was a kid, I played a lot of the Steve Jackson's Sorcery and Steve Jackson's fighting fantasy books, which are RPGs. They do have mechanics, and they're not just like there's only one path through this book that works. I played a lot of those as a kid. I have tried a few times to do the solo dungeon generation and character generation stuff in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but I can't I can't quite get into it that much. I feel like it's a lot of dice rolling and flipping back and forth and looking at the tables. Now, while we're waiting on Kyle to get back, I am going to point out I am working on the code to port the Dungeon Master's Assistant Volume 1 and 2. If you know those DOS apps, they are absolutely key if you are playing first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. The first one is Encounters, and the second one is Characters and Treasures, and they basically entail the large majority of a bunch of the mechanical work that a DM has to do. I am getting those done in C# slowly but surely. But one of the features I want to add, once I get those emulated and working 100%, is the solo dungeon generator. So you can fire that up and have a little bit of solo adventure yourself. You'll still be doing dice rolling. It's not going to be a video game. It'll be a computer assisted solo game. Kabuki, I'm sorry, Luther, you read and played Joe Deaver's Lone Wolf book and loved them. That's excellent. Midnight on Dagger Alley, the AD&D solo module with a red magic viewer that was actually fun for an evening. They also did they not also do one? They did a Conan and a Red Sonja one, and I think just a straight AD&D one that had the magic marker you'd rub over pages to get your answers. I think they did those. Anyway, Kyle, did you do solo adventuring, and what kind?
Yes. So I did the old fighting fantasy and choose your own adventure. That's actually how I started. So long before I did D&D. So I was, I don't know, 8 or 10 years old or something like that. And I got them from the library and scribbled all over them, of course. So when I was at high school and I had a friend tell me about Dungeons and Dragons, and I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, it's just like all those choose your own adventure and fighting fantasy books that you've been playing, except that instead of the book telling you what happens, there's a dungeon master who tells you what happens, and so you've got more options. So instead of, if you go east, turn to page 223. If you go west, turn to page 123. You just say if you're going to go east or west or camp out there or climb up or whatever," he said. And okay. I said, that sounds cool. And so I got into it from there. So I did those books after that. I preferred the fighting fantasy. The choose your own adventure from memory were kind of the more Disney Hallmark kind of one.
Yeah.
More warm and fuzzy. You didn't stab things or whatever. I wanted to stab things, at least in my imagination. Not really, but you know. I like the fighting fantasy a bit better. And the what was the space one called? I didn't do many of them. There was a space version as well.
Starship Traveler, which was a thinly veiled Star Trek adventure, but it was a Starship Traveler.
Yeah. So so I did that. Now I know other games have tried to do a solo version of that. I haven't really got into them very much. I've tried a few times, but they usually require you to make up something, and effectively you're being your own dungeon master. And I think the dungeon master requires a screen, a metaphorical screen, in that you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know if the NPC is telling you the truth or not, and so on. And obviously you can't really do that with yourself without multiple personality disorder or something.
Right.
But interestingly, it made me think of this, Dungeoneer, which was their attempt at making fighting fantasy rules into a role-playing game. What I enjoy is their gaming and GMing advice. Like they say, if a villain is involved in a plot, make him a good one. You know what we mean. All villains are appalling overactors with more ham than a butcher's shop. Furthermore, they all seem to have something slightly wrong with them. In some, this appears quite subtly, simply manifesting itself in an obsessive desire to rule the city, the land, the world. In others, there are physical problems. Gammy legs, hunchbacks, missing eyes, strange speech impediments, nervous twitches, whatever seems nasty enough. So this is one of the many things in this book that you couldn't get away with writing these days, because you couldn't suggest that a physical deformity indicates evil in a person. This was written in 1989. Whatever the problem, it should be plain from the outset that there is something wrong with them, that they aren't all there, that, well, they aren't normal. Bad guys always have a weakness, a fatal flaw which turns them into bad guys, a flaw which the heroes must discover and exploit to stop their evil plan. There's another bit where they talk about props. There's a list of monsters.
You're losing focus, Kyle. I mean, what you're saying is fine. You just gone with vision on us.
Yeah, I don't know my camera keeps doing that.
By the way, this is by request for Nom Nom Nom. It's pronounced drow.
Drow?
Nom 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 said, please pronounce drow for us. No Gary input, and it's pronounced drow.
Okay. There was some bit about props. Can't remember. Here was one funny bit in the book. Personality. Good idea to have a few ideas about who your hero is and how we react in particular situations, but do also allow new events in his adventuring career to shape his character as they happen. Blah blah blah. Finally, if you feel inspired, add a few choice oaths or favourite sayings for your hero to mutter at vital points. They've got them in the example characters and character sheets. Barados Ragnar, the human wizard, quotes, "Great, let's go. I wonder what's behind this door, and I wonder how you summon up one of those." Axel Wulfric, the human barbarian warrior, "I don't like the smell of these stone floors. In my tribe, we train our daughters to kill orcs by the age of 6. And never trust a wizard."
Sound advice.
Grimbold Tornhelm, the dwarf warrior, "You say that again and I'll split your stupid face from ear to ear. Isn't it time we stopped to eat yet?" And gold. I say, chaps, outnumbered again? Hey, jolly good show. You would have thought the old wizard could have managed to hire some orcs that didn't have bad breath for a change. That was an elf, by the way. But I love this quote. "Don't let yourself get too worried about all this talk about role-playing. While it can be great fun to escape into a new character, he or she will still have an awful lot of you in them. As you must know by now, for we've said it often enough, the ultimate object of all this is for everyone to have fun, not to recreate some form of high dramatic art. And talking of fun, we are now going to move on to the rules themselves, starting with that most thrilling of activities, combat."
They knew who
That
they were.
paragraph that's perfect.
They knew exactly who this was being marketed to. Please continue. I'm not ignoring you, Kyle.
Here we go. Props. So what the writers suggest is that if possible, you should have props. You should have things like pretend silver coins and things like that to liven up the game session. In the adventure, one of the adventures they present, you're looking for this Princess Sarissa, 16 years old with long blonde hair, very pretty, just what one might expect a captive princess to be. She's also clever and brave. Rather than dissolving into tears and helpless wailing, she has been trying to escape and deciding how she is going to get even with her captors when she manages to free herself. Having been brought up properly by her father, the wise and renowned King Solomon, she will be duly grateful to her rescuers, but not to such an extent that she falls in love with one of them or agrees to a marriage or other arrangements. The princes are brought up to expect a rich and powerful prince for a husband, not a rough, ill-mannered adventurer, especially if they are princesses of one of the most prosperous city-states in Alanzia. Being a person of noble birth and good upbringing, Sarissa naturally assumes that she is now in charge, and that the heroes will do what they are told. If they are uncooperative with her, she may become just a little petulant. Anyway, props. In each section, they suggest props. Each plot. In this plot, they say, if you can find a beautiful 16-year-old blonde girl willing to play the part of Sarissa, all well and good. But do remember to ask her permission first before tying her up, or there may be problems later. Brackets, only joking.
About what, Steve?
1989.
What?
1989. You definitely would not put this in a book now.
Very different time.
Yeah. I do think this is, as much as we like to mock the woke and all that, I do think this is a good progression, a good part of progress. I do like You could also profitably use something to simulate the booming, echoing voice needed for the sorcerer's final cryptic pronouncement. If you don't actually have access to a megaphone or a 200-watt PA system with built-on echo unit, try rolling up a piece of paper and intoning through that.
My God.
Dungeoneer.
Dungeon. There you go.
Full role-playing game version of fighting fantasy. It's not a very good role-playing game. The rules are a bit wonky and stuff, but there it is. It's every role-playing game, even if you don't play it, can be useful for inspiration and for a laugh. And a reminder, like, I do think villains should be villainous. They should be someone you feel good about sticking a sword through.
Yes.
I'm not so into the old morally grey sort of thing. The villain thinks that they're morally grey. That's part of what makes them a villain. But what I did is quite reasonable. Wouldn't anyone do just as me? You're just like me, aren't you? No, stab.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, you get what was his name? Governor Kodos from that episode of Star Trek. You know, it's like, you know, I saved the colony. Yeah, but the supply ship showed up like a week after you killed 5,000 people. But what if they hadn't? I would be hailed as a hero. Doesn't that make me an okay guy now? No. No, it does not.
In fact, we've got this place that we can strand you. It's called Center Elfie 5. Anyway, there's someone already there. You might get along.
Yeah. Collecting says a good DM provides situations for players to go through an area and explore. A great DM provides a plot for a campaign and guides the players through with a series of short adventures. I think either method can work. I think it all comes back to what, you know, the expectations of the players are, and there's no shame in asking your players what kind of game they want. You know,
the answer is usually a game I don't have to DM.
A game, truly.
Now I disagree with both of that. I think what you do is you provide situations, and the players turn it into a campaign. Those of us who play computer games, open world computer games, have often found that the side quests are more interesting than the main quest. So my reasoning is don't have a main quest. Have a bunch of side quests, and the players will make them into the main quest. They will make it important. It's like in warfare. Sometimes a point is important to capture simply because the enemy thinks that it's important. It's not inherently like a strategic point, or it's got resources, or ideal defense point, or whatever. Just the enemy thinks it's important, so you have to attack it and capture it. Likewise, that side quest becomes important and becomes the main part of the campaign simply because the players think that it's important. It doesn't mean you as a DM have to raise the relative importance of this. Oh, that guy you were attacking, yeah, he actually is the guy who's the evil necromancer that I originally planned to go. You know, you harass this beggar, but it turns out he's an evil necromancer that I actually had in a castle 100 miles away or whatever. You don't have to do that. They harass the beggar, and it turns out the beggar's more important than they thought, but he's not that evil necromancer. But they just pursue that line, and that's the main question. Because it's the same as the real world. At any time, there's a zillion things going on. You know, I mean, you know, if you're a young guy who wanted adventures these days, there's half a dozen in the wars around the world that you go and join. And those a bunch of side quests, that would be your main quest for you. That would be your campaign.
Orbital Air.
The other wars don't all come and join up with yours simply because you joined it. So you have a living world where things are happening, and things are going to happen whether the players join in with them or not.
Yeah. Orbital Air says, I'm not procrastinating. I'm doing side quests, of course. Well, I mean, for myself, this is not a pronouncement. This is just a GMing method. Any of you guys can feel free to use this. Kyle may bat this aside as frippery on my part, but that's cool thing about this. All ideas are at least worth being layered. I like the idea of the quantum encounter. It's like you create an encounter that is really super cool, but the party doesn't go there where it is. So you just move the encounter to wherever they're going to be. The encounter exists in one spot, but if it's not encountered, does it really? And so if if that like, 8 giant spiders and there was a +1 sword and a 12 desiccated dwarves and 1 desiccated halfling. This is quite the haul here after we took them all out, and it was just right here on the road. Yep, right there on the road, and definitely not in the dungeon that is 500 miles to the west that you guys didn't bother exploring. Kabuki says Heisenberg's D&D encounter precisely. You always do that, otherwise it doesn't exist. I mean, think about it in a computer game that does stuff like I remember one of the before they just became multiplayer only shooters, back when they had plots in World War II, first person shooters were big business. Take care, Luther. We'll see you around. I think I think it was it Met? No, it wasn't a Medal of Honor game. I think it was a Call of Duty game. But there's this German bunker you're supposed to take, and if you rush into it, there's a few Germans, and they'll rush out and they'll shoot you. And there's like no way to not take some damage. You will not finish the fight with 100 hit points. And so I tested something else once. I moved right up to the spot where I could bounce a grenade into the bunker where the Germans were, and they rush out, and I gun them down. I wait a few minutes. 3 more rush out. I gun them down. I did this for... It felt like an hour, but it was probably really only like 10 minutes. Just crouched there, and they would fall just close enough that I could just move the mouse pointer over and pick up their guns and constantly keep myself supplied with ammo. They never, ever, ever stopped spawning because I hadn't hit the trigger in the game that made the game go, he's gotten this far, I'll stop throwing German soldiers at him.
Well, also these games always have the bodies that just disappear. Or they merge into each other. If the bodies actually piled up, because like you could actually shelter behind the pile of Nazis. You take cover. Or the approaching Nazis would be able to take cover behind you, like in one of the Gamers movies, or was it Darkness Rising, I think? Where the Bard keeps getting killed.
Yes.
And so the Bard ends up hiding behind a pile of bards. All the Bardy does.
Mad Railroad Conductor. I think that's what the RR stands for, but the Mad RR Conductor. It was the one. It was actually the bit where you assault the cliffs at Point de Houx in D-Day. So whichever late 90s, early 2000s FPS that was. All I remembered is it chugged on my poor little Pentium 4 PC with its stinky video card.
A Nazi clown car.
You mean a Volkswagen?
A clown car full of Nazis. I was picturing these guys in SS uniforms with clown faces. But SS daggers. Killer clown Nazis.
Yeah, there you go.
There's got to be a horror movie out there, Killer Clown Nazis.
There probably is. There probably is. Yes, thank you, King of the Mountain. It was Medal of Honor Allied Assault. So that was it. So what's next for us, Kyle? What new ways to humiliate ourselves are you going to create for us on Wednesday?
Well, I thought we'd play Killer Clown Nazis from Outer Space. But
I think that settles it. Sounds just like some episodes of Danger 5 you were going to kind of piece a campaign together out of.
Well, I was just glancing over the retro, stupid, pretentious article once more. It had, which I'll post the link for the guys again. The threefold theory. God, that's like 16, 17 years old article now. He says retro is games with things like classes and levels. Stupid games don't take themselves seriously. Pretentious games think they're better. They're not just games, they're cutting edge explorations of blah, blah, blah. Things like Vampire. And he goes, like Ron Edwards with his gaming narratives and simulation theory said, if it wasn't just pure gamism, pure narrativism, or pure simulationism, then it was an incoherent game. You had to have a laser-like focus on just that one aspect. And Jeffrey had said, no, that's impossible. You've just got to have mixture. So there's retro stupid play and retro stupid, which is, encounter critical. Retro pretentious, like Classic Traveller. He said, the big hole in my theory is that black area in the chart where retro stupid pretentious is found. That ought to be the most totally rad place in the universe, but right at the moment, the only game I can think of that definitely goes there is World of Cinnabar. But that game is at its best when drifted to retro stupid play, which is really easy to do. The trick is to not be Raven C.S. McCracken. I suppose one could argue that Dungeons and Dragons fits the requirements to be retro stupidly pretentious, but every RPG theory fails the moment D&D is taken into consideration, so I probably ought to quit while I'm ahead. That's great. Here's another retro pretentious one that I would like to give a go. I don't know if people will be interested or how well it'll go, but that's what I'm interested in.
Only if there's PTSD taken, Kyle.
There's no PTSD. I mean, if you want to roleplay your characters,
I'll report you to Ron Edwards. Oh, I think it's the height of hilarity that Ron Edwards wound up being a designer of Hero System. Mr. Story and Pretense and everything went to arguably one of the crunchiest role-playing games ever created.
Well, of course he did. It's just like when a politician stands up there and talks about family values, he's usually found screwing around with one of his staffers or something.
Yeah, he gets caught with a dead hooker.
Yeah, it's just, the guy who's preaching is, so I'm probably secretly a story gamer. Anyway, no. This is what I'm keen on. Conflict, the adventure game of modern warfare. I thought that next week we'd do a read through so that people can see what it's about, and perhaps make a couple of characters, making characters once you're sitting down at the game table with a game master who knows the system only takes 10 or 15 minutes. But talking it through to understand some of the principles behind it, because I only put 48 pages in it, just so you could just see the rules. 48 pages, that's enough. And even then I had to pad it out a bit. I thought we'd do a read through of that and a discussion of that, which even if people aren't interested in playing in the game or playing it themselves if they buy it, I think it could be interesting to talk about the kind of thinking that goes into game design with the idea of how it's going to turn out at the game table. So hopefully that could be an interesting conversation for people to get into as well. Just as you've talked about how you write modules and stuff. Because I've written a few RPGs now, and they're still selling. People are still buying them, despite me doing absolutely zero to promote or anything like that. And some of them I don't even have a copy of themselves now.
Right. You can, by the way, that link I put up there, that you can go to Drive-Thru RPG, and I highly recommend you get a copy of Conflict. That is the PDF, but you should get it printed on demand. Kyle, what is the Lulu link for those who would like to get a print on demand copy? Greetings, Light Main, by the way, in case you missed my text missive there. I feel you. I know how tired you I know tired, I guess I would say. I understand tired.
So, yeah, I recommend the print version as well. Nobody reads PDFs. And the print version, it's deliberately, you can see it's not very large, it's digest size, the same size as the old classic traveler books. So it can fit into cargo pant pocket or very easily into a bag of whatever size. And yeah, these are the complete rules. I've got some drafts that I'm playing through of vehicle combat. The vehicle combat is separate because basically, if you engage in vehicle combat, it doesn't matter what your character's stats and body armor and stuff is. If you lose the vehicle, you lose the characters. So that's why it's separate. So this one is more small unit tactics. Like a section of like 4 to 10 people running around having adventures. So it's meant to be your SWAT teams and that, and it can be combat heavy or combat light according to the interests of the players. But yeah, anyway, we can discuss that more next week. And
we shall. We absolutely shall. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys are too. Get yourself a copy of Lulu, Descent into Avernus Vehicle Rules. Wow. Just want to make sure I don't miss anyone's missive. Yes, hero system. It's one of those beautiful things like the BRP system of Call of Cthulhu. It doesn't matter up to 5th edition. You can a hero character you created in 1980, whenever, is perfectly usable in Hero 5th edition, although 6th did kind of wonky things up quite a bit. And that holds true for Call of Cthulhu also. The recent version broke some things compatibility-wise, but as long as you play 1st through 5th edition Call of Cthulhu, you're good. Kyle, will going forward in future editions, will you maintain compatibility and conflict?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no reason to change anything. The latest edition as well has a Creative Commons attribution license, so you're free to share, adapt for any purpose, even commercially. All you have to do is give original attribution. Yeah. This nonsense originally written by Kyle, that's it. So
excellent.
You can go do your own thing with it. If for some reason you wanted to publish your own little conflict module or something like that, or conflict in space, I probably wouldn't use it for like medieval stuff. It's the hand-to-hand and the melee stuff. It's just a bit lethal. In the absence of modern medicine, your character wouldn't last very long.
I'm going to drive you up the wall. I'm sorry, go ahead.
In the absence of modern medicine, your character wouldn't last very long. And so you'd have to tack on a magic system, and then you're probably just better off playing D&D or something. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. What are you going to drive me up the wall with?
No, I'm going to drive you up the wall one day and actually build a vehicle combat system for conflict. Look, Kyle, complex systems. Oh, your onboard fire control computer can get hit. No, that's not what it's.
Anyway, that's next week.
Yes, so we will do a read-through of Conflict next Wednesday, and we'll make a couple of characters, and we'll have a lot of fun with it. Anything Anything else you can think of, Kyle?
No, that's it. That's
Okay.
all the nonsense I wanted to spout today.
Okay. Just make more characters, clones. Crunch all you want, we'll make more. Hi, RPG Grandma. I'm sorry you're just getting here now because we're about to wrap up. I'm not sorry you're here. I'm just sorry you're only getting here now. But yeah, we're gonna miss it. Frozen Tuna Deluxe. Can't miss Wednesday. No, it is going to be a can't miss Wednesday. Thank you, Robert Phillips. Thank you, everybody. For hanging out with us tonight. So yeah, again, tomorrow evening I am going to be back. Stephen Radney McFarlane will be here from Gripner Games talking about the Glimmering, which again I think is kind of a pretty unique system, and they seem like pretty cool folks. So we're going to check that out. And Friday night we will be back, of course, with a little bit of Preamble Ramble. Maybe we'll look at Dungeon Magazine #1. And then at 9 o'clock, we're going to play some classic Gamma World. So that about does it for me. Kyle, you want to get the last word in?
Join the Discord, to which I provide the link. There you go.
Join the Discord, to which Kyle has provided the link. I don't see the link on screen.
Just takes a little moment to come up.
Yeah.
Because I posted it in the
there it is.
YouTube one, so there's a little delay between the two.
Okay. So when you swing by the Discord, say hi, and we'll say hi back. There's the link, and we'll catch you guys at a later time. So be good to each other. Peace, everyone. And we are out.
Have you seen my owl bear? Here's to all the weirdos everywhere in the woods and in the air. Have you seen my owl bear? Should I shave off all my hair? Bobs are all around. Some live in tunnels underground. Some are fat, some are rich, some are sleeping in a ditch. Can you ride a crooked horse without a saddle way off course? Naked as a toad all the way to Smoky Joe's. Have you seen the little creep driving fast in his little green Jeep? He smells like fish and brandy, but his rotten teeth look dandy. Take me to the show, I don't care if fast or slow. From action flicks to dancing flicks, just take me to the show.